All right, let's jump right in. Have you ever felt that strange pull between things feeling completely fixed, like fate is playing a hand, and other times feeling utterly random, like pure chance?
Oh, definitely. It's that feeling maybe you had a moment where everything just sort of clicked into place perfectly.
Yeah, or the opposite, like playing a game where, I don't know, the dice just will not go your way no matter what you do.
Exactly. That tension. It feels fundamental, doesn't it? Between things seeming fated and things seeming totally arbitrary.
It really does. And today we're taking a deep dive into this really fascinating essay called Randomized Determinism. It tackles this exact paradox.
And it does it in a pretty unique way, using some surprisingly relatable starting points.
Right. Like, the author starts with memories of playing video games, believe it or not, and builds from there towards this really unique perspective on reality, causality, even free will.
Yeah, the core idea being proposed is that maybe randomness and determinism aren't these mutually exclusive forces we usually think they are.
But maybe they're two sides of the same coin, like working together.
Something like that. So our mission here is really to follow the author's train of thought. We want to unpack how they get from a simple gaming insight to this potentially profound model of the universe.
Okay, so we'll look at their main ideas, how randomness might just exist right at the very beginning, setting the stage.
And how that impacts our usual ideas about free will, or even, the randomness we think we see in physics, like quantum mechanics.
And then there's the idea of cyclical universes, which is pretty mind-bending.
Definitely. And ultimately, try and figure out, well, what does any of this actually mean for us living our lives?
So we'll go through the key parts of the essay, look at the specific examples, the arguments, really get into the nuts and bolts of what randomized determinism actually suggests.
Sounds good. And the author kicks things off with a memory from childhood gaming.
Yeah, specifically playing the original Fallout. Remember that game?
Oh, yeah. Classic. Bleak, but classic.
And the specific thing was trying to pickpocket characters in the game.
Right. Which, especially early on in those kinds of RPGs, is incredibly hard. Your stats are low, you fail constantly, get caught.
Yeah, the odds are stacked against you. But the author describes figuring out this little trick. Quick save, right before you try it.
The classic save scumming technique.
Exactly. If you failed, you just hit reload, and you're right back before the attempt. Try again.
And crucially, in that game's engine, each attempt involved essentially a new, fresh roll of the dice, a random number generated on the spot.
So reloading didn't just reset your position, it reset the random chance itself. You got a new roll every time.
Meaning if you just kept reloading and trying, persistence would eventually guarantee success. You'd eventually hit that lucky roll.
It felt like cheating fate, right? Bending the game's randomness to your will through sheer repetition.
Absolutely. You weren't getting better in the game world, you were manipulating the game system for generating chance. Powerful feeling.
Okay, so that's the Fallout experience. But then, years later, the author plays a different game. XCOM. Enemy Unknown.
XCOM. Famous for its brutal probabilities.
Totally. And they try the same tactic. Miss a shot may be one of those infamous 95% chance shots that still somehow misses.
Happens all the time. So naturally, you quick load, try the exact same shot again.
And miss. Again, the exact same way. Reload again, try again, same miss. Over and over.
Yeah, that's the XCOM difference. And it wasn't a bug. It was a very clever, very deliberate design choice by the developers for Axis.
How did it work differently then? Why was the outcome fixed?
Okay, so instead of generating a random number at the moment you take the shot, XCOM does something different. It pre-generates these really long sequences of random numbers for each soldier.
Like in advance? When does it do that?
Maybe at the start of the mission, or even when you start the whole campaign.
Yeah.
It creates a list of random outcomes waiting to happen.
So when my soldier fires their gun...
The game doesn't roll dice then. It just pulls the next number off that soldier's pre-generated list.
So the list itself was created randomly.
Right, using a random seed initially. So it is random in its origin.
But once that list exists, the sequence of outcomes is fixed, deterministic.
Precisely. Reloading the game takes you back in time, sure, but it doesn't change the soldier's internal list.
Yeah.
The next number on that list is still waiting, and it still says miss every single time.
Wow. That's clever for preventing cheating, but yeah, I can see how that sparked a bigger thought.
Exactly, because that mechanic, it suddenly felt incredibly resonant with how life itself often feels.
How so?
Well, on one hand, reality seems governed by cause and effect, right? One thing leads to another, laws of physics, chemistry. It feels deterministic, like things have to happen the way they do based on what came before.
Sure, like a chain reaction.
But then, at the same time, life feels so arbitrary, just deeply arbitrary. Why this particular reality? Why am I me here now? Why these specific circumstances? It feels like it could easily have been different.
Like the initial setup was just random chance.
Yeah, it's that exact tension. The feeling that everything unfolding now is necessary given the past, combined with the feeling that the starting point, the whole initial configuration, seems utterly random and unchosen.
And that's what led to the big question inspired by XCOM. What if reality itself operates on this principle?
What if the universe's initial conditions, way back at the Big Bang, were generated randomly, like a cosmic seed number dictating the starting state?
So one moment of true randomness at the very beginning.
Which could explain that arbitrary feeling. Why the fundamental constants have the values they do, why matter was arranged just so, leading to this specific universe out of countless theoretical possibilities.
And then, after that initial random seed is set,
determinism takes over. The laws of physics acting on those specific initial conditions govern everything that follows. Cause and effect, unfolding logically and necessarily from that random start.
Okay, so it's a blend. Neither pure randomness, because we see order and laws.
Right. Chaos fails.
Nor pure determinism, because the starting point feels unexplained and arbitrary.
The script problem.
But combining them, that starts to feel more descriptive of our actual experience. The author mentions struggling to find one word for it.
Yeah, it's like we lack the vocabulary for this middle ground. But the term they land on is randomized determinism.
Okay, so let's unpack the critiques the author makes of the two extremes, starting with pure determinism and this script problem.
Right, so if you assume everything is purely deterministic, just an unbroken chain of cause and effect, like a movie playing out.
A pre-written script for the universe.
Exactly. The fundamental problem, according to the essay, is that it begs the question, why this script? Out of all the infinite possible scripts the universe could have followed, why this specific one?
And they give examples of how arbitrary our specific script feels, right?
Yeah, lots of them. Like on a personal level, why are you? Male, female, your eye color, born in this century, in this culture, on this planet. Why not countless other possibilities?
Or zooming out, why the fundamental constants? Why is pi roughly 3.14159? Why does gravity pull things together instead of pushing them apart? These values don't seem logically necessary, they just are.
Why carbon-based life? Why did primates evolve intelligence on Earth? Why not silicon-based life or intelligent reptiles evolving somewhere else?
And the huge differences in people's lives. Why immense suffering for one person, incredible fortune and longevity for another?
Pure determinism says, well, that's just how the initial conditions and the laws played out. But the author argues that just pushes the mystery back.
Back to the very beginning.
Right. What determined those initial conditions? What set the first domino falling in that specific way? There's this nagging feeling that the particular shape of our reality needs some explanation for why it's this way and not some other way. Pure determinism doesn't offer that why.
Okay, so that's the issue with seeing it all as just a fixed script. What about the other side, pure randomness, the why chaos fails part?
Well, pure randomness or pure indeterminacy, where everything happens without cause or reason.
Yeah.
That's arguably even less capable of describing the universe we see.
Because if everything were truly random,
it would be utter chaos. Not just unpredictable, but completely incoherent. Particles popping in and out of existence randomly, forces changing strength and direction moment to moment.
No stability. Atoms couldn't form reliable bonds, stars couldn't coalesce, planets wouldn't hold together.
Exactly. There'd be no structure, no laws, no consistency, no cause and effect. Nothing could persist or build complexity.
The author uses an analogy, right? Trying to write a book by flipping a coin for every letter.
Yeah. You wouldn't get a story, you'd just get random noise.
Yeah.
A purely random universe couldn't support anything we recognize, not physics, not chemistry, not life, not even a consistent flow of time.
But obviously that's not what we see. Our universe has structure, laws, consistency. Things follow rules. Patterns emerge.
Precisely. There's clearly an underlying order holding it all together, and that order isn't compatible with pure randomness.
So this is where the XCOM model comes back in as a potential bridge.
Exactly. It avoids the why this script problem of pure determinism by having a random origin.
And it avoids the no structure problem of pure randomness by having deterministic laws take over after that origin.
It suggests a reality that feels arbitrary in its specific configuration, yet unfolds predictably based on that configuration. It's not a rigid script, nor total chaos. It's that fusion. randomized determinism.
Okay, let's dive deeper into that core concept then. Randomized determinism as the potential operating system of reality. The author points to singularities in physics as possible clues.
Yeah, points where our current understanding kind of breaks down. The center of a black hole, or the very beginning of the Big Bang, time equals 0.
Our physics models just stop working there.
Pretty much. Concepts like space and time as we know them lose meaning. But the essay suggests maybe these aren't just failures of our math. Maybe they're telling us something fundamental.
Like they're not dead ends, but maybe openings?
Openings, yeah. Hints about where the structure and the arbitrariness of the universe meet. And the central idea proposed is that the Big Bang singularity, that T0 moment, might have been the only place, the only instant, where true fundamental randomness could exist.
The ultimate new game moment.
Exactly. Before the rules of this specific universe were fully locked in. At that singular point, the universe effectively rolls the cosmic dice.
Generating a random seed. A specific set of initial conditions for this round of reality.
And then, from that moment forward, the switch flips. Determinism takes the driver's seat. Those specific initial conditions dictate how the laws of physics operate, and everything unfolds step by step, logically and necessarily, from that starting point.
So randomized determinism is that very specific sequence. True randomness only at the origin.
Explaining the why this universe.
Followed by strict determinism forever after.
Explaining the how it unfolds. It's presented as a potential architecture for reality itself.
But, okay, this immediately clashes with quantum mechanics, right? Because the claim is no more true randomness after the Big Bang.
Right, and that seems to fly directly in the face of decades of quantum experiments. When physicists measure quantum systems, they observe outcomes that really look fundamentally random.
Even when they try to make the starting conditions identical each time.
That's the standard interpretation, yes. Things like a particle's path or its spin measurement. They seem inherently unpredictable, even under controlled conditions. This is a big reason many physicists believe indeterminacy is baked into nature at the lowest level.
So how does the author reconcile this? They don't deny the experimental results, do they?
No, they don't deny the results. They question the interpretation that those results prove fundamental randomness in nature itself. The argument hinges on whether we can ever truly create identical conditions.
What do you mean? We can control lab conditions pretty precisely now.
Locally, yes. But the essay argues the universe is far too interconnected and complex for true isolation. It's filled with constantly fluctuating fields, gravity, electromagnetism, you name it, permeating everything.
And particles aren't just tiny billiard balls, they're more like fuzzy field things.
Kind of, yeah. Diffuse, field-like entities, subtly linked to everything else via things like the inverse square law. The influence drops off fast, but technically it never reaches 0.
So everything is always subtly tugging on everything else, everywhere, all the time.
Pretty much. And every fraction of a second, the exact configuration of everything atoms and the equipment, the air, the building, distant stars, is shifting in minuscule, unpredictable ways. These are tiny effects, but at the quantum scale, they could be enough to nudge outcomes.
So we think we're running the experiment under identical conditions, but we're not, because we can't control the state of the entire universe, influencing our little setup.
That's the core argument. Assuming identical conditions requires a level of cosmic control and precision that might simply be impossible.
Okay, so the thought experiment they propose is, imagine you fire a photon, it goes left. Now rewind the entire universe, every particle, every field, to the exact state just before you fired it. Then fire again.
What happens? Does it have to go left again?
Yeah.
Or could it randomly go right this time, even though the starting state was supposedly identical?
And the author's intuition, the crux of their argument here is...
Their intuition is firm. If the conditions were truly, perfectly identical down to the last quantum fluctuation across the entire cosmos, the outcome must be identical. The photon must go left every single time.
Why is that intuition so important?
Because suggesting otherwise, that identical causes can produce different effects for no reason, fundamentally breaks the principle of causality. It implies a universe that just arbitrarily changes its behavior moment to moment. That sounds like chaos again.
Which we already decided doesn't fit the ordered universe we observe.
Exactly. So the conclusion here isn't that quantum results aren't statistically random from our perspective. It's that this observed randomness might reflect our inability to perfectly replicate the total initial state, rather than reflecting inherent randomness in the laws of nature themselves.
We're seeing the randomness in our control, not necessarily in nature's underlying rules.
That's the idea. And speaking of the universe's initial state, the author brings in the cosmic microwave background radiation, the CMB, as potential supporting evidence.
Right, the CMB. That's the echo of the Big Bang, the oldest light in the universe.
Yeah, from about 380,000 years after the Big Bang. Before that, the universe was this hot, dense, opaque plasma. Light couldn't travel freely.
But then it cooled enough for atoms to form, and suddenly it became transparent.
And all that trapped light was released, traveling through space ever since, stretching out into microwaves as the universe expanded. Penzias and Wilson stumbled onto it in the 60s, won a Nobel Prize. It's huge confirmation of the Big Bang.
And the crucial thing about the CMB for this argument is that it's not perfectly smooth, right?
Exactly. If the early universe had been perfectly uniform, perfectly smooth everywhere.
Gravity would have had nothing to grab onto, no denser spots to pull matter towards.
Right. You just have this featureless, expanding gas, no galaxies, no stars, no planets, no us, just boring uniformity.
But the maps of the CMB show these tiny variations. Little hot spots and cold spots, temperature fluctuations.
Tiny. Like parts per 100,000, but incredibly important. Those were the primordial density fluctuations. Slightly denser areas had slightly more gravity.
So they started pulling in surrounding matter, the seeds of cosmic structure.
They were the seeds, the first dominoes falling, leading to the formation of the vast cosmic web of galaxies and clusters we see today.
And the author's interpretation is that these ripples in the CMB are what?
They're essentially the fingerprint of the cosmic seed, the fossilized record of the initial random conditions generated at the Big Bang.
So the specific pattern of those fluctuations is the random part.
Explaining why our universe has the particular large-scale structure it does.
And the fact that gravity then inevitably acted on those fluctuations is the deterministic part.
Explaining how that structure formed from the initial pattern, it fits the randomized determinism model quite elegantly.
Okay, this makes sense, but it leads to a big question. If my ultimate origin is this random seed plus deterministic laws, how does that affect, well, me? Is my deciding to have fish for dinner tonight somehow written into the Big Bang?
Right. This leads into the ideas the essay calls stacked reality. And the answer is a kind of yes and no.
Okay. How can it be both?
Well, no. The specific thought, I want fish tonight, wasn't literally encoded in the CMB fluctuations billions of years ago. The initial seed only contained the fundamental starting conditions, the basic laws, the initial distribution of energy and matter.
So it's not like a detailed script of my entire life?
Not at all. But from that initial moment onwards, everything unfolds through cause and effect. Each moment emerges deterministically from the moment immediately preceding it. So every instant becomes a new set of starting conditions for the next instant.
Like a continuous chain reaction.
Exactly. The author uses the Minecraft seed analogy again. The seed number itself doesn't contain a picture of the mountains or rivers.
Right, it's just a number.
But that number, when fed into the game's deterministic algorithm, generates the mountains and rivers. The randomness of the seed plus the deterministic rules create the complex world.
And this applies in layers in the real world, too.
That's the idea. Think about biology. It's built on chemistry and physics, but it has its own emergent rules. DNA is like a molecular seed, right? But it's an algorithmic recipe that unfolds deterministically through incredibly complex biological processes.
You can't just look at the physics equations and predict a frog.
Exactly. Frogs operate according to biological rules evolution, physiology, which emerge from, but aren't reducible to, just physics.
And there are even higher layers, like economics.
Sure. Economic systems have rules like supply and demand. They run on a physical substrate, resources, human brains, but they use abstract concepts like money that behave according to their own emergent deterministic logic.
Culture, too, like trends and ideas spreading.
Yeah, another layer. Emerging from biology, psychology, evolving through social interaction, communication, memes, norms, ideas planted long ago, influencing behavior today.
So it's not like these are separate worlds, but stacked rule books.
Fractal layers is the term used, all part of one universe.
Oh.
A TikTok dance needs a brain, which needs neurons, which need chemistry, which needs physics. It's all interconnected, but different levels operate with different dominant rules.
Okay, so back to the fish dinner. It wasn't in the Big Bang seed.
No, but it is the deterministic outcome of the unbroken chain of cause and effect leading right up to that moment, your biology, your environment, your past experiences, the availability of fish, everything converging.
And seeing determinism this way, it's not meant to be oppressive.
No, the framing is the opposite. It's presented as the essential scaffolding, the structure that makes emergence possible. Without that underlying deterministic order, you couldn't have complexity, life, or even consciousness arise.
Which leads us straight into maybe the most controversial part, the idea that determinism isn't the enemy.
Yeah, this confronts the common negative perception head-on. Most people hear determinism and think no free will, which feels bad. It feels like losing control, like being a puppet.
It challenges our whole sense of self, responsibility, justice systems. Everything seems built on the idea that we make free choices. People react strongly to questioning that.
Understandably. But the essay makes this bold counterclaim. Determinism doesn't take anything away. It gives us everything. It's the architect, the life giver.
How does that argument work?
It argues that without deterministic physical laws, you couldn't have stability. Matter wouldn't behave consistently, stars wouldn't form, infuse elements, planets wouldn't coalesce, complex chemistry couldn't happen.
So no building blocks for life.
No building blocks, no stable environment, no possibility for complex structures like organisms or brains to ever emerge. Our very existence, the essay argues, is born from this physical necessity, this lack of choice, and how fundamental reality operates.
We're talking about free will after we already exist because of determinism.
Exactly. We fight for freedom, but we didn't choose to exist or to be the kind of beings who value freedom. That was all determined by prior causes.
And this isn't about like political determinism or being controlled by others?
No, not at all. This is about the fundamental structure of reality itself. The argument is that this underlying deterministic order is the solution, not the problem. It's what makes anything possible. The alternative, the absence of determinism, isn't freedom, it's chaos. Reality falling apart.
So to the feeling, but I don't like losing my freedom.
The essay's direct challenge is you never actually had the kind of absolute, uncaused freedom you think you're losing.
Which naturally flows into the next big section, the illusion of free will.
Right. Here, free will is presented as essentially a story. A narrative our brains construct, possibly as an evolutionary adaptation.
A useful illusion for survival.
Perhaps. The idea is that as self-consciousness evolved, the mind started identifying very strongly with the body and its immediate survival needs. This created that powerful sense of being a separate I, an ego that is in charge, making independent decisions.
But the essay suggests this is just a phase, that the illusion can dissolve.
It suggests that as consciousness develops further, that strong sense of separation and personal authorship can fade. And importantly, nothing is actually lost in that fading because the absolute control wasn't real to begin with.
Okay, so what about those immediate reactions? Wait, I'm not in control.
The answer given is nuanced. You are control, in a sense, but so is everything else interacting with you. I don't have a choice. Well, choices are made, actions happen, but they aren't initiated solely by an isolated you.
It's about realizing you're not separate from reality.
Exactly. You're part of it. A wave in the ocean. It's a two-way street. You affect the world affects you, constantly. Suffering often comes from resisting that flow, trying to maintain the illusion of being a separate commander. The realization is more like, I am this unfolding reality.
The essay uses biological examples here too, doesn't it? Things our bodies do without our conscious will.
Yeah, really compelling ones. Do you consciously decide to grow your hair? Tell your heart to beat, manage your insulin levels, digest your food, filter toxins with your liver?
No, of course not. That all happens automatically.
Right. If your conscious will was needed for basic bodily functions, you die the moment you fell asleep. But the underlying chemistry and biology just keep running, deterministically.
Okay, but what about higher level things, like deciding to learn piano? Surely that's my choice.
The argument is that even that choice is deeply embedded in a causal chain. Your desire arises from your history, your culture. The possibility depends on pianos existing, electricity, having the time and resources, all determined by prior events.
So circumstance massively shapes and constrains our perceived choices.
Hugely. Think about infant mortality rates 500 years ago versus now. Being born human versus, say, a jellyfish. Born into royalty versus slavery. These external factors define the landscape of possibility far more than some internal, uncaused will. Your life isn't just up to you, it's up to everything.
The idea is there's no isolated control center, because everything affects everything else.
That's the core. No atom is truly isolated, so how could a complex system like a human be? If your very existence wasn't your choice, why assume your subsequent actions somehow break free from that causal chain?
So the feeling of autonomy is useful, maybe evolved for social reasons, but ultimately an illusion that hinders deeper understanding.
That's the perspective presented. It's a developmental stage, perhaps, but one we can potentially move beyond.
What about thoughts, though? Can I control my own mind?
The essay challenges that too. Think about a butterfly. Why did you just think of one?
Because he said the word butterfly.
Exactly. The thought arose in you, triggered by an external stimulus interacting with your internal state. It came to you and through you, not purely from an independent you generating it out of nowhere.
Our thoughts are shaped by everything, our past, our language, our culture.
Profoundly. An ancient fisherman couldn't spontaneously think about smartphones or quantum physics. His reality, his inputs, didn't contain those concepts. Our inner world is just as much a product of the interconnected web as our outer actions.
So the self isn't an isolated driver, but more like the whole cosmos in motion, experienced locally.
That's a good way to put it. Shaped by everything that came before, constantly interacting with everything now. Not a separate spark, but an interconnected wave. Things move because other things move them.
The essay also questions if having more options means more freedom, right? Using animal comparisons.
Yeah, humans can go to the moon, but fish can breathe underwater, birds can fly without machines. Do we have more freedom just because our type of possibility is different?
Or the smoker example. The possibility to quit exists, but the addiction, the conditioning, the causal chain often prevents it. Possibility isn't freedom.
And consciousness in this view doesn't grant freedom from causality. It reveals it.
It's like a spotlight showing you the chains of cause and effect and your place in them.
Exactly. And with that awareness comes, potentially, a deeper sense of responsibility, not because you're an uncaused chooser, but because you see how your determined actions ripple through the whole interconnected system. You're freed from the illusion of autonomy, not from causality itself.
Okay, wow, that's a heavy reframing of free will. And this leads into the most speculative part of the essay, looking beyond our known universe.
Yeah, this is where the author explicitly says we're moving into more philosophical territory, connecting to ideas about cosmological evolution, and even finding parallels in ancient wisdom.
It starts by acknowledging that physics hits a wall at the Big Bang, T0.
Right, our models break down. But that doesn't automatically mean nothing came before. It just means our current tools can't see past that point. Like a calendar starting at year 1 doesn't mean nothing happened in year 0 or before.
So the proposal is maybe the universe isn't a one-off event.
Maybe it's cyclical, a process that repeats, expanding, maybe collapsing, bouncing back, starting anew, like a cosmic breath, in and out, endlessly.
And this cyclical view avoids the philosophical headache of needing a first cause or a creator.
That's one argument for its elegance. Instead of needing an external timeless entity to kick things off, maybe reality itself is timeless and self-generating. The universe is its own source.
It's presented as simpler, relying on natural recursion instead of invoking something supernatural.
While fully admitting it's speculative, lacking hard proof, the author finds it a more compelling viewpoint based on that principle of simplicity and self-organization.
And remarkably, this isn't just philosophy. Modern physics is actually exploring similar ideas.
It is. Things like bouncing universe models, Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, even some interpretations of string theory involving colliding brains sparking new universes. They're all theoretical, unproven, but they show that the idea of cosmic cycles isn't completely out of left field scientifically.
Which leads to the surprising connection with ancient thought, specifically Buddhist cosmology.
Yeah, particularly Mahayana and Tibetan traditions. For centuries, they've described reality precisely as an infinite cycle of universes. Countless worlds arising, maturing, decaying, dissolving, giving rise to the next. No ultimate beginning or end.
In the essay notes, this isn't just a vague metaphor in Buddhism, it's detailed doctrine.
Right. They also touch on the Buddhist view of time as relational, arising from change and interdependence, not being a fixed container. Which again, strangely echoes some very modern physics ideas about time perhaps being emergent, not fundamental.
So even universes participate in this cycle of birth and death in the Buddhist view.
Yes, within the grand cycle of samsara. It's fascinating how these ancient contemplative traditions arrived at a picture that modern mathematical cosmology is now exploring through entirely different means.
Each cycle, each bounce, is like passing the torch.
And crucially, within this cyclical model, each bounce could be the moment of re-randomization.
A new Big Bang, a new cosmic dice roll.
Exactly. Resetting entropy. Perhaps subtly changing the fundamental constants or initial conditions, a fresh install of reality for the next cycle.
Bringing us right back to the XCOM idea again. A new random seed gets fed into the laws of nature for the next universe.
Precisely. But then comes the really trippy twist, as the author calls it.
Uh-oh. What now?
What if the system isn't just repeating, but evolving? What if the universe, across cycles, learns?
How would that even work?
It links back to dependent origination. Everything arises based on conditions. What if the conditions themselves subtly adapt over cosmic timescales? Like a Darwinian process, but for universes.
Yeah, survival of the fittest universes.
Not necessarily competing, but maybe a tendency for cycles to favor configurations that are more effective at generating structure, complexity, maybe even consciousness. Universes that are more generative might become more probable or stable over cosmic eons.
Okay, that is speculative.
Highly speculative, acknowledged as such. But it's presented as a logical extension. If things evolve within universes, maybe universes themselves participate in a larger evolutionary process. The goal isn't stasis, but maybe increasing potential.
Like a systemic feedback loop across cycles, subtly biasing towards coherence and complexity.
Something like that. Not moralistic karma, but systemic karma. A tendency favoring conditions for stars, chemistry, life, and eventually minds asking these very questions.
And again, stress is a perspective, a way of seeing, not theology.
Absolutely. But it leaves you with the thought that maybe those ancient monks, through deep insight, glimpsed something fundamental about cosmic cycles that science is only now starting to formulate mathematically.
Which brings us finally to the ultimate question the essay tackles. So, what is the point? Given all this randomized determinism, stacked reality, maybe endless cycles, maybe cosmic evolution, what's the meaning of it all?
And the author points out a really interesting paradox right here. If randomized determinism is true, then the fact that the author wrote this essay, and we're discussing it, was predetermined by the chain of events set in motion by the initial random seed.
Right, it had to happen this way.
The fact that this particular random seed happened to produce a universe capable of evolving beings who could have these thoughts, who could develop philosophy and science to this level.
Yeah.
That possibility arising in the first place was dependent on the initial random roll.
So we're here contemplating the system because the system's random start allowed for beings like us to eventually emerge and contemplate it. It's circular.
Beautifully circular. And the essay suggests maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe, through its inherent random then deterministic nature, is structured in such a way that it inevitably creates the conditions for its own self-discovery.
This connects to Alan Watts' philosophy, the universe playing hide and seek with itself.
Exactly. Watts saw the universe not just as stuff happening, but as a performance. It hides its unified nature within all the diverse forms, galaxies, trees, animals, thoughts, feelings.
And then it evolves consciousness as the tool to find itself again, to peek behind the curtain.
Precisely. And the key paradox Watts highlighted. We have to become these seemingly separate, shaped individuals with egos and identities.
In order to gain the perspective needed to realize that fundamentally we are unshaped, we are part of the undivided whole.
It's captured perfectly in that Watts quote. You are something that the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing.
So our individual consciousness isn't a bug or an accident?
That might be the whole point. The universe unfolding in order to experience itself subjectively.
And the goal, then, isn't just knowing about the universe, but realizing our identity with it. Reunification.
That feeling of, there's no me discovering the universe, I am the universe discovering itself. The essay argues this isn't just poetry. If consciousness arises from the same fundamental stuff, governed by the same laws as everything else, then a conscious being is literally the cosmos turning awareness back onto itself. You're not in the universe. You are a temporary, localized expression of the universe.
The feeling of being separate is just a functional illusion.
A necessary one for navigating the world, perhaps, but an illusion nonetheless. Underneath, you are the universe experiencing itself through the lens of your biology and history.
Consciousness is the interface, the bridge back to the whole.
It allows the question, what am I? What is this? To be asked. And through that asking, that awareness, the universe gets to be its own answer.
Like that other Watts quote. You didn't come into this world. You came out of it like a wave from the ocean.
And the essay leaves us with this final thought. If the wave finally truly remembers it's the ocean.
That's not the end.
Maybe that's the beginning of something entirely different.
Wow, okay. That's quite a deep dive. From video game mechanics to the potential self-awareness of the cosmos, we've traced this idea of randomized determinism.
Yeah, randomness at the start, setting the specific conditions, followed by unwavering deterministic laws unfolding everything else.
Challenging our gut feelings about free will, questioning quantum randomness, opening up possibilities of cyclical, evolving universes.
And landing on this potentially radical view of consciousness as the universe experiencing itself. It takes that everyday paradox, things feeling both fated and random, and spins it into this grand, potentially meaningful cosmic narrative.
It's definitely a lot to chew on. A total shift from feeling like a tiny separate self trying to figure out a vast external reality
To seeing yourself as an integral part of that reality's own process of becoming aware.
So for everyone listening, just sit with that for a moment. If your life, your thoughts, your actions are all part of this determined unfolding from a unique cosmic starting point, and if your awareness is fundamentally the universe looking through your eyes,
How does that land? How does it change how you see yourself, the world, events? Does it bring a different sense of connection, maybe even responsibility, knowing you're not just a player in the game, but a manifestation of the game itself, playing its part in this vast unfolding story of cosmic self-discovery? Something profound to reflect on.